Hello class, we're about to start section 8.2, multiplying and dividing rational expressions. It says recall how to multiply and divide numerical fractions. Okay, now when you multiply numerical fractions, what you do first is you typically multiply the top times the top. 9 times 4 is 36, and the bottom number times the bottom number, or denominator times denominator, which will give you 240. And then you would simplify this. Both of these have 12 in common, so you divide both by 12. And this will give you 3 over 20. Now this is one way of doing it. Now another way, and I'll put this as way 2, and this will be way 1. Okay, so with way 2, what you could do is what we call the prime factorization method. So the prime factorization of 4 is 2 times 2. The prime factorization of 9 is 3 times 3. And we would take both of these values and put them together in your numerator. Now your denominator, the prime factorization of 15 is 3 times 5. And the prime factorization of 16 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Now, we'll simplify out what we have in common. We have 2 sets of 2's here and 2 sets of 2's here. We have 2 sets of 3's here. Well, actually 1 3, not both. So we have 1 3 here and 1 3 here. So in our numerator, we will have 3 left. In our denominator, we have 5 times 2 is 10 times 2 is 20. So it gives you the same result. Just depends on what method you like to use. Now for problem number 2. We have 6 over 7 divided by 9 over 28. We know that we would keep this first fraction the same. Division will become multiplication, and we'll take the reciprocal of the second fraction, which would be 28 over 9. Now, we could do one of the two ways that we showed here. So I would suggest that I think we should do the prime factorization method. 6 breaks down to 3 times 2. And 28 breaks down to 7 times 2 times 2. And our denominator, 7 is prime already, and 9 breaks down to 3 times 3. So they each have a 7 in common and 1 3 in common. And our final answer here would be 8 over 3. And there's nothing more that could go into that number. Now it says here, how to multiply and divide algebraic fractions. If division, invert the second fraction and multiply. Factor all polynomials in both fractions. Reduce factors that divide to equal 1. Multiply. Note that we often leave answers in factored form. Okay. It says find the product or quotient. Okay, now, if you notice here, we start off with a division problem here. So the first thing we should do is, let's just write these fractions. Let's change this division to multiplication. And now we could go through and simplify. Now let's do the prime factorization of 20. The prime factorization of 20 is 2 times 2 times 5. And then we have x to the 6th power. Now I want to put that on last. So let's go here with this next value here. 2x minus 4. We can factor out a 2, and we'll be left with x minus 2. Okay, now, with the x to the 6th power, we can write that at the end, times x to the 6th. Now we come here. In our denominator, we can factor out a 7, and we'll be left with x minus 2. The prime factorization of 50, we know is 2 times 5 times 5. And then we'll have times x to the 8th. Now, if you notice, we have these x minus 2's that will simplify out. We have this set of 2's that will simplify out. We have one set of 5's that simplify out. And we know x to the 6th and x to the 8th will leave an x squared in our denominator. So our final answer would be 2 times 2 is 4 for the numerator. And our denominator will be 7 times 5, which is 35, and the x squared. And we're done. Now we come here to b. Now this is already multiplication, so we could do some factoring. We will factor out, for b, we could factor out a -3, and we'll be left with x plus 5. Well, 2x plus 5. Okay, now, this will be multiplied by, we could factor out a 6, and we'll have x plus 3. And this is all over. X squared minus 9, we know that factors out to be x minus 3 and x plus 3. Now, with this 4x squared plus 4x minus 15, we can actually factor this out to 2x minus 3 and 2x plus 5. Now we can simplify. But before we do that, there are some of you that may still need a little refresher on how to factor 4x squared plus 4x minus 15. So this is how we would go about doing it. Let me scroll up a little bit just to show this. You have a is 4, b is 4, and c is -15. So we know our a times c is actually -60. Now the factors of -60, we'll first do 60. It's 1 and 60, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, 4 and 15, 5 and 12, 6 and 10. And that's it. Okay, now, because our a and c is negative, but our b is positive, that means that all of the lower numbers, or the smaller numbers, are negative. So when we add these numbers together, the two numbers we will use is -6 and +10. So I'm going to write this over here. So we will have 4x squared minus 6x plus 10x minus 15. We group the first two values. We can factor out a 2x, and we'll be left with 2x minus 3. We could group the second two terms here, and we can factor out a +5, and we'll be left with 2x minus 3. So 2x minus 3 is one of our parentheses, and 2x plus 5 is the other. So that's the explanation of how to factor the 4x squared plus 4x minus 15. Now the 2x plus 5s will simplify out. The x plus 3s will simplify out. And that's all that we could simplify. So our final answer would be -18 all over x minus 3 and 2x minus 3. And that's the final answer for that problem. Now we go to the next page. We have example 2. It says find the product of quotient. We have a cubed minus 8 all over a squared minus 7a plus 10. And then we're going to divide a cubed plus 2a squared plus 4a. Okay, first things first. Let's change this division to multiplication. So we have a cubed minus 8 all over a squared minus 7a plus 10. Change division to multiplication, and it'll be 1 over a cubed plus 2a squared plus 4a. And we can leave that in this parenthesis. Now, what we have here is we had the difference of two cubes. So we know what we would do. We would take the cube root of a cubed and the cube root of -3, which would give us a minus 2. That'll be our first parenthesis. Now in our second parenthesis, we'll say a cubed divided by a, which is a squared. -8 divided by -2 will give us +4. So that will be the last number. Now to get our middle term, we will multiply a times -2, which will give us a -2a, and we will take its opposite and make it +2a. Now all that was multiplied by 1, so we would just leave that as is. Now we go down here to the bottom. Now a squared minus 7a plus 10 will give us a minus 5 times a minus 2. And then in the second parenthesis, the only thing we can factor out here is a, and we'll be left with a squared plus 2a plus 4. There's nothing more we could do with that. Now we look here, we have a minus 2's in common. And then we have the a squared plus 2a plus 4 in common. So all of those simplify out. And since everything simplify out in your numerator, that means 1 is left. And our denominator would be a times a minus 5. And that is our final answer. Now we go here to b. Now we have 6 minus y over y squared plus 8y plus 16 times 16 minus y squared over 4y squared minus 16y minus 48. Okay, first things first, we could factor out a negative 1, and we would be left with y minus 6. And then here we could factor out a negative 1 as well, so this would be times negative 1. And then this parenthesis we know would end up, well, let me write that out. It'll be y squared. Well, actually, no. Let's scratch that out. Yes, you should get rid of what I originally wrote when I factor out the negative 1 here, because this is actually the difference of two squares. So we could write that out as 4 minus y and then 4 plus y. Now we're done factoring the numerators. Now we come to the denominators. Now we know y squared plus 8y plus 16 would end up being y plus 4 and y plus 4. Now, the second parenthesis here, we could factor out a 4. And then we would be able to have, we would have y squared minus 4y minus 12. Now, before this should be a 12 here. Before we start simplifying anything out, we need to factor this parenthesis here. So let's rewrite what we had. And this parenthesis here factors out to y minus 6 and y plus 2 and y plus 2. Okay, so now let's go through and simplify out what we have in common here. We know 4 plus y and y plus 4 is the same thing. Okay, next we have y minus 6 and y minus 6 here. Now, there's one other thing that we need to do, another little step. It shouldn't take that long. We could factor out a negative 1 here. So if we factor out a negative 1 here, we factor out a negative 1, that would make this 4 negative and this y a positive. So now we know negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. So in our numerator, we will have y minus 4. Because remember, negative 4 plus y is the same thing as y minus 4. And then our denominator, we will have 4 times y plus 4 and y plus 2. And that is it. Now we scroll down here to a and b. It says example 3. Let f of x equals 5 times x plus 2 over 10x minus 70, and g of x equals 8x plus 16 over 4 times 7 minus x. It says find an equation of g divided by f. So we will have our g value, which is 8x plus 16 all over 4 times the parentheses 7 minus x, divided by f, which would be 5 times x plus 2 all over 10x minus 70. Okay, so now what we would do here in our numerator, well, we could factor this. We could factor out an 8, and we'll be left with x plus 2. And our denominator, we could factor out a negative 1 here, and that would give us negative 4, and then it'll be x minus 7. Now our division becomes multiplication. We'll take the reciprocal. We add 10x minus 70 over 5 times x plus 2. Now, that 10x minus 70, we know we could factor out a 10. So we add 8 times x plus 2 all over negative 4x minus 7 times we could factor out a 10, and we add x minus 7 all over 5 times x plus